A single dad just wanted to give his daughter a normal day, but when they sit on a picnic spot reserved for a billionaire, they get far more than they ever expected. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The morning sun hadn't even cleared the rooftops when Michael Turner's alarm buzzed to life, vibrating against the cracked nightstand with a shrill urgency. He groaned, slapped at it until the noise stopped, and sat up in the dim gray light. Another day, another scramble. The smell of stale motor oil clung to his clothes even after last night's quick shower, and the ache in his back from a full week under hoods and engines reminded him that rest was more suggestion than reality. He shuffled into the kitchen, where yesterday's dishes still sat in the drying rack and the coffee pot blinked stubbornly, demanding to be filled. A box of cereal sat half open on the counter, its contents dangerously low. He poured the last of it into a chipped bowl and added milk with a cautious sniff. Still good, barely. Across the hall, Emily's bedroom door creaked open and a mop of tangled hair peeked out. "Dad?" her sleepy voice called. "Morning, Bug," he said, softening. Emily patted in, dragging her backpack by one strap. "Is it Saturday?" "Almost. One more day of school." He slid the bowl across the table. "Eat quick, we're already running behind." As she sat and crunched through her cereal, Michael worked around her, making a peanut butter sandwich, stuffing a juice box and an apple into her lunch bag, then checking the time and muttering a curse under his breath. He still had to get her to school, get back to the shop, and meet a supplier who was already 2 weeks late on delivering brake pads. "Did you sign my permission slip?" Emily asked through a mouthful of cereal. Michael froze mid-step. "What slip?" She pointed to her folder, which he'd completely forgotten about. "Picnic day. Miss Redding says we have to bring it or we can't go." With a sigh, he grabbed a pen, scribbled his name, and stuffed the paper back in. "There, done. You're official." 10 minutes later, they were out the door. The old sedan coughed and whined before starting, but it held. As they drove down the cracked street toward the elementary school, Michael glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. He was tired, overwhelmed, barely keeping it all together. But as Emily smiled at him, jelly on her cheek, he knew he wouldn't trade it for anything. The evening light filtered through the blinds in soft, golden stripes, casting long shadows across the small living room. Michael sat on the worn couch, sorting through a stack of unopened bills with the same dull ache settling in his chest as always. Emily was on the carpet in front of the coffee table, carefully coloring a picture of a tree with birds in the branches, her tongue poking out in quiet concentration. "Dad," she said suddenly, not looking up from her drawing. "Yeah, Bug?" She paused, then glanced back at him with wide, hopeful eyes. "Can we have a picnic?" Michael blinked. "A picnic?" "Like a real one," she said, sitting up straighter. "With a blanket and sandwiches and maybe juice boxes. In the park, like the families in the movies, not the backyard. A real one." He set the envelopes down slowly. "Where'd you get that idea?" "Lila had one last weekend. Her mom packed strawberries and everything," Emily said dreamily. "She said it was the best day ever." Michael managed to smile, even as his chest tightened. It sounded so simple, so normal. But everything these days had a price tag. Time, gas, groceries. He wanted to say yes without thinking. But his brain was already calculating how much a loaf of bread and a pack of juice boxes would eat into next week's grocery budget. "I don't know," he said gently, trying not to let the weariness in his voice show. "I've got a lot going on with work." Emily didn't pout or complain. She just nodded, looked down at her drawing, and started coloring again, but her smile had faded. Michael sat there for a long moment, watching her shoulders slope, watching the way her crayon slowed. He rubbed his hands over his face and sighed. "Hey, Bug?" She looked up again. He smiled, soft and crooked. "How about Saturday? We'll pack some sandwiches, find a sunny spot in the park, and have our own best day ever." Emily's face lit up like a sunrise. She jumped up and threw her arms around his neck. "Really? Really?" he whispered into her hair, holding her tight. "Just don't forget the strawberries." Friday started like most days do, early and already behind. The hum of the space heater barely kept the morning chill at bay in Michael's small kitchen as he stood over a battered notebook, pen in hand, trying to stretch dollars like they were made of elastic. Rent was due in 5 days. The electric bill was late. And Emily had grown out of her sneakers again. But tomorrow was picnic day, and he was going to make it happen no matter what. He jotted down a grocery list on a torn receipt. Bread, peanut butter, jelly, juice boxes, apples. Maybe chips if they're on sale. His pen hovered over the page. He wanted to add something sweet. Maybe cookies, or those frosted animal crackers. Emily loved, but he crossed it out and kept moving. At the shop, business was slow. Too slow. 2 cars sat half-finished in the bay, waiting on parts that hadn't come in yet. A third customer had called to cancel a scheduled oil change, saying their cousin would do it cheaper. Michael sighed and rubbed his temples. He couldn't afford to close the shop, not even for half a day. But Saturday mornings were usually quiet. He'd risk it. Just this once. By mid-afternoon he slipped away to the discount grocer down the road, still wearing his grease-streaked coveralls. He pushed a wobbly cart past rows of dented cans and off-brand cereal, hunting for deals. Every item he picked up, he weighed in his mind cost versus joy. Would Emily notice if the juice boxes weren't the ones with the cartoon animals? Probably not. Would she miss the cookies? Maybe. He tossed in a small pack anyway and didn't look at the price. He paid in cash, the kind of crumpled bills and coins that said this purchase had been scraped together from coat pockets and glove compartments. As he stepped outside, grocery bag in hand, the late sun glinted off the hood of his old sedan. It was still holding together barely. Just like him. That night, he hid the grocery bag in the cupboard so Emily wouldn't see it early. She was already asleep, curled in a blanket on the couch, a book slipping from her hand. Michael leaned down, brushed her hair back and whispered, "We're gonna have our picnic, kiddo. Promise." Saturday morning arrived with a pale sun and the kind of soft breeze that made everything feel a little more possible. Michael stood in the kitchen, jangling the handful of coins in his pocket like they were lucky charms. He had a few crumpled coupons tucked in his wallet, and a mental list memorized down to the last detail. It wasn't much, but it was enough for today, at least. Emily bounded into the room, wearing a too-small jacket and mismatched socks, her excitement radiating like a light bulb. "Are we still going to the store before the picnic?" she asked, already grabbing her little canvas tote bag like she was preparing for a grand adventure. "You bet," Michael said, smiling through the tension that never quite left his chest. "But only if you're my official shopping assistant." She saluted dramatically. "Sir, yes, sir." The grocery store was already buzzing when they pulled into the parking lot. Michael parked far from the entrance habit from years of protecting his car's temperamental engine from door dings and careless drivers. They walked in together, hand in hand, like they were stepping into something sacred. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the speakers played tinny pop music that Emily hummed along with. Michael guided the cart down the aisles slowly, keeping one eye on prices and another on his daughter's face. He'd let her pick the sandwich bread, only the soft kind, Daddy, and the color of the juice boxes, purple, because purple tastes better. When they reached the cookie aisle, she looked up at him with a question already forming in her eyes. He crouched beside her, holding up a coupon like a winning lottery ticket. "If we play our cards right," he said, "we might be able to swing some of those frosted animal crackers you like." Her grin nearly split her face. "Best day ever." At checkout, Michael laid out the exact change coins, crumpled bills, a few folded coupons, while Emily chatted happily with the clerk about the big secret picnic they were planning. No one in line seemed to mind. Walking out, groceries in hand and sunlight warming their shoulders, Michael glanced down at his daughter. She was skipping beside him, clutching her little tote like it held treasure. It wasn't about what they bought. It was about the feeling that today, even in the smallest way, he'd made something special happen. The park was quiet that morning. the kind of quiet that only existed just after sunrise, before the joggers showed up, before kids spilled off playgrounds, before the city remembered it was supposed to be busy. Michael's old sedan rumbled gently into the parking lot, coughing once as it shut off, then fell silent. He exhaled, gripping the wheel for a second before turning to Emily. "You ready, picnic queen?" Emily nodded so hard her ponytail bounced. "I brought the napkins and the animal crackers." "Well, then we're officially good to go." They walked across the dew-kissed grass, Emily leading the way like she'd memorized a map no one else could see. She stopped suddenly at a gentle rise near the lake sunny, shaded just enough by a willow tree, and perfectly empty. "Here," she declared, spinning in a slow circle. "This is the perfect spot." Michael smiled and set down their bag. He shook out the red and white checkered blanketone he'd found buried in the hall closet, still smelling faintly of cedar and summertime, and spread it across the grass. Emily plopped down with a contented sigh like she'd just claimed a throne. He pulled out their humble feast, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, juice boxes still cool from the fridge, 2 slightly bruised apples, and the crown jewel animal crackers in a clear sandwich bag. Emily gasped when he placed them in the center of the blanket like fine china. "I declare this the best picnic ever," she said, beaming up at him. Michael leaned back, one hand bracing behind him, eyes drifting out over the lake. Ducks floated lazily in the distance, and the breeze rustled the leaves above them. For the first time in a long time, the noise in his head quieted. What he didn't see, what neither of them saw, was the small white sign staked into the ground just a few feet behind them. The word "Reserved" printed in bold black letters. Below it, the name Savannah Hale. Michael reached for a sandwich and passed one to Emily. "Cheers," he said, tapping hers gently with his. She giggled. "To best days ever." Neither of them noticed the black SUV that had just turned into the lot at the far end of the park. The first bite of Emily's sandwich hadn't even made it to her mouth when Michael noticed the 3 men. They emerged from the far side of the park path, walking in a tight formation, black dress shoes crunching the gravel, pressed slacks swaying in rhythm, each of them wearing an earpiece and the kind of expression that didn't leave room for small talk. Michael's stomach sank before he could place why. They didn't belong here, not with their tailored suits and mirrored sunglasses, not in a sleepy public park on a Saturday morning. He instinctively shifted, subtly placing himself between them and Emily, though she remained blissfully unaware, still holding her sandwich like it was treasure. "Sir," the tallest one said as they stopped just at the edge of the blanket. His voice was clipped, polished, not rude, but not friendly, either. "I'm going to have to ask you to move." Michael blinked. "Come again?" "This area is reserved." Michael looked around. The grass was wide and open. Other families were scattered under trees and on benches. "Reserved? It's a public park." One of the other men pointed behind him to the small white sign Michael hadn't noticed earlier. There it was, half hidden in the tall grass behind their blanket. "Reserved," the third man read flatly, like the word itself should have been obvious. "This entire space is booked for a private party scheduled to begin shortly." Michael's jaw tightened. He glanced at Emily, now looking up at the men with wide eyes, sandwich paused mid-air. Her smile had vanished. "We're just having a little picnic," Michael said, keeping his voice even. "We won't be long. Thought we'd come early, beat the crowds." The first man's jaw ticked. "Sir, I understand, but Ms. Hale's instructions were clear. This area needs to be cleared before her arrival." Michael stood slowly, brushing crumbs from his jeans. "Right, of course." Emily tugged at his sleeve. "But, Dad," he forced a smile down at her. "It's okay, Bug. We'll find another spot." As he began packing up their things, the tallest man spoke again, this time more awkwardly. "If it's any consolation, you picked the nicest spot in the park." Michael didn't answer. He just nodded once, quietly folding the checkered blanket as the sound of tires on gravel echoed behind them. The black SUV had arrived. The SUV door opened with a soft click, and out stepped a woman in white, not just white immaculate. Crisp, tailored slacks, a silky blouse, and dark sunglasses that reflected the sky. Her heels made no sound as they touched the grass, but somehow her presence rippled across the park like a stone dropped into still water. Michael had just zipped up the lunch bag when he noticed the men straightening. The tallest of them stepped aside like clockwork, clearing a path. "That's her," one of them muttered under his breath. "Ms. Hale." Michael turned fully now, squinting against the sunlight. Savannah Hale. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but it didn't click until he caught a glimpse of her face beneath the sunglasses. Flawless, sharp, but not cold. He'd seen her once on a magazine cover at the garage. Something about the new face of tech, and how she'd turned a family empire into a billion-dollar machine. And here she was, at the park. In front of their half-eaten sandwiches and a crumpled napkin with jelly on it. Savannah paused, her gaze flicking to the blanket, to the food, to Emily, clutching her juice box like it was a lifeline. Then, to Michael's sweat-darkened t-shirt, worn jeans, hands still stained faintly with grease. Her head tilted slightly, just a fraction, calculating, curious. "Everything all right?" she asked, her voice low, smooth like silk wrapped around steel. The lead man stepped forward. "Yes, ma'am, just a small delay. These folks didn't realize the space was reserved. They're moving now." Michael cleared his throat. "Didn't mean to step on anyone's plans. We thought it was open." Savannah looked at him for a beat longer than was comfortable, then turned her attention to Emily. "Nice spot you picked," she said gently. Emily blinked up at her, cheeks pink. "It has the best shade." A ghost of a smile crossed Savannah's lips. "It does." Michael should have felt embarrassed, maybe even a little angry at how casually this woman could own a slice of public space. But instead, what he felt was something stranger, like the moment wasn't over. Like she wasn't done with them yet. The men waited for her to give the final word, but she simply looked back at the blanket, the cookies, the girl, and said, "Give us a moment." Savannah stood at the edge of the blanket, arms loosely crossed, her expression unreadable behind her dark sunglasses. The breeze teased a strand of hair from her tight ponytail, but she didn't move to fix it. Michael, still crouched near the picnic bag, looked up slowly, unsure if he should speak or wait for her to pass judgment. Her security team hovered behind her like shadows, tense and ready. But she wasn't tense, not exactly, more observant. Like she was trying to understand something that didn't fit. Emily, unaware of the invisible weight between the adults, popped a grape into her mouth and tilted her head. "Are you coming to the picnic too?" Michael's breath caught. Savannah blinked, and for the first time, she lowered her sunglasses slightly. Her eyes were sharp sea glass green, and full of something that didn't match the rest of her carefully curated image. Not power, not annoyance. Curiosity. "I might be," she said softly. One of the security guards stepped forward. "Ms. Hale." She raised a hand, silencing him with barely a glance. Her eyes stayed on Emily. Michael stood, slow and cautious, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I didn't know this area was reserved. We'll move. It's not a problem." Savannah looked at him then, really looked. His face was weathered in that quiet, working man way. Not old, but worn. His shirt was faded, and his jeans had a small tear at the knee. Honest clothes. Hands that looked like they'd fixed 1,000 things no one else could. She didn't see defiance in him, just a father trying to give his daughter a moment of something normal. She took a breath. "How long were you planning to stay?" Michael shrugged. "Just long enough to make a memory." Something flickered in her expression, faint, almost imperceptible. A tightening around the mouth, a softening around the eyes. She nodded once and stepped forward, lowering herself into a crouch beside Emily. "Well then," she said, brushing a blade of grass from her sleeve. "I'd hate to interrupt something that matters." Michael stood frozen. The guards exchanged looks, but Emily just grinned and offered her a cookie. Savannah took it without hesitation, and just like that, the woman in white stayed. Savannah sat on the edge of the checkered blanket like she'd never worn a suit worth more than Michael's monthly income. Her hands rested lightly in her lap, fingers curled, posture still too perfect to look natural on grass. but she wasn't rushing to leave. Emily was completely unfazed by the quiet power sitting across from her. She scooted forward, unwrapping a second peanut butter and jelly sandwich with meticulous care, then held it out with both hands like a gift. "Do you want one? Dad made extras," she said brightly. Michael opened his mouth to interject. Wasn't sure if Billionaire's ate PBJ from slightly squished wax paper, but Savannah's hand was already reaching out. "Thank you," she said. Accepting the sandwich with a grace that made the moment feel oddly formal, her gaze flicked briefly to Michael, then settled back on Emily. "It's been a while since someone offered me lunch without an agenda." Emily grinned, proud. "They're my favorite. We always use the kind of jelly with seeds, 'cause it tastes more real." Savannah smiled. Small. Careful. But it was real. "Sounds like a solid choice." Michael sat again, slower this time, still unsure whether this was happening or if he was hallucinating from budget stress and too little sleep. He watched as Savannah inspected the sandwich like it was an artifact from another life, then took a bite. Her eyes closed, just briefly, and for a moment, she looked more like a woman than a headline. "It's good," she said, almost surprised. Emily nodded. "Told you." Savannah glanced down at the crumbs in her lap, brushed them off with a quiet laugh. And Michael saw it, that flicker of something soft behind her polished exterior. A person. Tired, maybe. Lonely, even. Whatever armor she walked in with had started to loosen. Michael broke the silence gently. "Didn't think we'd be having a picnic with royalty this morning." Savannah raised an eyebrow. "Is that what I am?" Emily answered for him. "You have guards and sunglasses and fancy shoes. That makes you important." Savannah tilted her head. "Well, I suppose it does." But her eyes lingered on Emily, and for the first time in a long while, her smile didn't look like it had been practiced. The guards didn't know what to do. They stood just beyond the shade of the willow tree, exchanging silent looks, shifting their weight in expensive shoes that weren't made for grass. One of them cleared his throat softly, waiting for a cue from Savannah. It never came. Instead, she sat a little straighter, brushing invisible lint from her blouse before setting her half-eaten sandwich on a napkin. Then, with deliberate calm, she looked at Michael and said, "Mind if I stay a little longer?" Michael blinked. "You mean, here?" She nodded once. "It's been a long week, and this is the first quiet moment I've had in a while." Michael opened his mouth to respond, but couldn't quite find the words. Not because he didn't want her there, but because it felt like a question no one like her should have to ask. She could buy the whole park if she wanted. And yet, here she was, waiting for his permission. Emily broke the moment with a simple, enthusiastic, "Yes." Savannah's mouth twitched into a smile. "Well then," she said softly, shifting on the blanket. "Thank you." She removed her sunglasses, setting them gently beside her, and Michael saw her eyes clearly for the first time, green and alert but not cold. If anything, she looked relieved. As though sitting here, in the middle of a low-budget picnic with a mechanic and his daughter, gave her some kind of space she didn't even know she needed. Emily held up the cookie bag again. "You can have another one. There's plenty." Savannah reached in and took a frosted elephant, studying it for a second before popping it into her mouth. "I don't remember the last time I had one of these." "They're good, huh?" Emily grinned. "Surprisingly, yes," Savannah said, chuckling. "And charmingly nostalgic." Michael leaned back on his elbows, watching the two of them. It was surreal. 10 minutes ago, he was packing up to avoid security. Now the billionaire tech heiress was sitting cross-legged on his old picnic blanket, munching animal crackers like she belonged. For once, he didn't overthink it. He just let the moment be. "Welcome to the best picnic in town," he said, tipping an invisible hat. Savannah smiled. "I believe you." By late morning, the sun had climbed higher, casting warm light over the lakeside and turning the blades of grass into gold-tipped threads. The park was beginning to stir. More families arrived with strollers and fold-out chairs. Joggers looped the walking path, and a few curious dog walkers slowed their pace near the willow tree, each doing the same subtle double-take when they noticed her. Savannah Hale. sitting cross-legged on a checkered blanket. Eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich off a paper plate, Michael noticed the glances, the hushed whispers, the way some phones half-lifted before their owners second-guessed themselves. But Savannah didn't seem to care. She reached for a juice box, poked the straw in with minimal fuss, and sipped like it was a fine vintage. "This is charming," she said after a beat, glancing around. "The last lunch I had was a 300 salad served on a boardroom table with people arguing about server architecture." Michael chuckled. "Well, this is fresh off the Turner kitchen counter. No arguments, just jelly." Emily beamed. "And animal crackers." Savannah smiled down at the little girl. "Of course. The pièce de résistance." Across the park, her security team kept a wide perimeter, visibly uncomfortable, eyes scanning every movement, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. A man in a navy blazer spoke into his earpiece, murmuring something urgent. Another kept checking a tablet, as if hoping the surreal scene in front of him might resolve itself. Savannah caught the looks, glanced over her shoulder, and gave a small shake of her head. It was enough to make them stand down physically, at least. Their confusion lingered like fog. Meanwhile, Emily handed Savannah a paper napkin, giggling when it tore a little. "Sorry, that one's kind of crinkly." "It's perfect," Savannah said, carefully dabbing the corner of her mouth. Michael watched her, still trying to process the strange alchemy happening before him. A woman born into fortune, whose face had graced magazines and investor conferences, now sitting barefoot on his old blanket, eating the most humble meal a father could piece together with coins and coupons. It wasn't just surprising, it was human, and that, more than anything, was what made it feel real. The sun had settled high above the trees, filtering through the willow branches in lazy, dappled patterns. The lake shimmered quietly, ducks gliding past in tight formation, and the low hum of the park life carried on in the background. Muffled conversations, the creak of a stroller wheel, a burst of laughter from the playground down the path. But beneath the tree, it was still. Peaceful, in a way that felt rare. Savannah sat with her legs stretched out on the edge of the blanket, one hand resting on the grass, the other loosely holding the stem of an empty juice box. Her heels had been quietly kicked off sometime during the last hour, and she'd tucked her feet under her like she belonged there. Michael leaned back on his elbows beside her, watching as Emily tried to stack animal crackers into a tower. She'd made it to 4 before they toppled, sending her into a fit of giggles that rang out like music. Savannah smiled softly, almost sadly. "You know," she said, not quite looking at Michael, "I came here to be alone." Michael turned his head toward her. "Funny place to look, for solitude." She gave a light shrug. "Not when you own the permits and can reserve half a park." "Touché," he said, smiling. She exhaled slowly, gaze still fixed on the rippling lake. "I had 6 meetings yesterday, one right after the other. The last one ended with a board member telling me I was too emotional to be CEO because I said no without smiling." Michael frowned. "Sounds like someone who's never fixed a carburetor." That made her laugh, a real one this time, short and surprised. "Yeah, I don't think they've ever fixed much of anything." There was a pause. "Not uncomfortable, just open." "When I heard Emily laugh," she continued, her voice lower now, almost reverent, "it cut through everything. The emails, the press, the noise in my head. For a second, it was just that sound. Clear, untouched." Michael glanced at her, and for the first time, he saw it under the designer blouse and polished words, the weight she carried, the kind you couldn't measure in dollars. "You ever get that?" she asked. He looked out at the water, then down at Emily, now sorting crackers into pretend teams. "Every day," he said. "That's why I keep showing up." Savannah nodded, quiet. The breeze tugged gently at her hair, and for a little while longer, she stayed right there. It started with a single photo. Someone across the park had taken it, blurry, but unmistakable. Savannah Hale, barefoot on a checkered picnic blanket, sipping from a juice box and smiling down at a little girl with pigtails and mismatched socks. A man sat beside them, rugged and unpolished in his grease-streaked jeans, laughing at something the girl had said. The caption read, "Billionaire CEO Savannah Hale, seen in local park with mystery man and child double life?" By the time Michael was locking up the shop Sunday evening, the photo had already made its rounds. Social media was ablaze. Gossip blogs were clawing for details. Business sites ran headlines that walked the line between intrigue and scandal. Who is the mechanic besides Savannah Hale? Tech heiress seen, playing house in public park picnic, or PR stunt? Internet reacts to Hale's down-to-earth display. Michael didn't notice at first. He was focused on cleaning up peanut butter smudges from Emily's car seat and sorting through laundry. It wasn't until his buddy Jared from the tire shop sent him a link that the weight of it hit. He sat on the couch, staring at the screen. The photo looked surreal, like someone had taken a dream and thrown it under a microscope. There was Emily, grinning up at Savannah. And there was him, caught mid-laugh, unguarded. Exposed. His phone buzzed again. A text from a former customer. Then another. A voicemail from a local reporter. Someone had even left a message at the garage, asking if he had a statement. A statement? About what? Sitting in the grass and sharing sandwiches? At that moment, he heard Emily in the other room singing to herself, completely unaware of the storm brewing just outside their front door. Miles away, in a penthouse that overlooked a skyline she'd stopped admiring years ago, Savannah stood barefoot on cold marble floors, holding her phone. Her name was trending. Again. But this time, it wasn't about her latest merger or speaking at a global summit. It was about them. She didn't smile, didn't panic either. She just stared at the image and whispered to no one at all. Of course they'd twist it. And somewhere beneath the noise, she wondered if she'd just ruined something quietly perfect. The next morning started the way most did, too early, too many things to do, and not enough hands to do them. Michael rolled up the garage door, just after 7, the scent of motor oil and steel already thick in the air. The town was still waking up, the hum of delivery trucks and distant barking dogs blending into the morning fog. He set his coffee on the workbench and reached for the clipboard hanging by the office door, already mentally juggling jobs in his head. The Corolla needed new brake pads. Jenkins' truck was still idling rough. And the part shipment delayed again wasn't going to fix itself. He was elbow-deep in the hood of an old Civic when he heard the sound, not the usual clunk of tired engines or the rattle of loose mufflers. This was smoother, sleek, a low, buttery purr that didn't belong on this side of town. He straightened just in time to see it pull into the lot. A vintage Cherry, red convertible with gleaming chrome, spotless rims, and a kind of quiet swagger that made the other cars look like junkyard extras. And behind the wheel, Savannah Hale. She stepped out like she had every right to be there, which, technically, she did. But something in her stance said she knew this wasn't her world. Not exactly. Still, she didn't hesitate. Michael wiped his hands on a rag and stepped forward. "Didn't expect to see you again so soon," he said, half a smile tugging at his mouth. She slid her sunglasses up into her hair. "Wasn't planning to be here, but then my convertible decided it needed a dramatic flair. Won't shift out of second." He glanced at the car. Classic build. She's beautiful. Also temperamental, like most beautiful things. That pulled a soft chuckle from him. "You want me to take a look?" She hesitated, then nodded. "If you're not too busy." Michael tilted his head, gesturing to the mostly empty lot. "For you? I think I can clear some time." She smiled, tired, grateful, and maybe a little uncertain. "Thanks, Michael." And just like that, Savannah Hale handed him the keys, not just to her car, but maybe, unintentionally, to something much bigger. The convertible's hood was up, revealing a pristine but stubborn engine that refused to play nice. Michael leaned over it with a practiced eye, socket wrench in one hand, brow furrowed in quiet focus. Savannah stood a few feet away, arms crossed, the wind teasing a few strands of her hair loose from a low ponytail. Her heels had been swapped for white sneakers, still spotless, but at least pretending to be casual. "So," she said, watching as he adjusted a throttle cable, "you talk to all your clients this much, or just the ones who crash your picnics?" Michael smirked, not looking up. "Only the ones who bring their own security detail." She let out a soft laugh, then glanced around the garagette, the dented file cabinet, the patched-up office door, the faded family photo thumbtacked to the bulletin board behind the desk. "This place, it feels like it's held together with determination. And duct tape," he added. "Don't underestimate the power of duct tape." Savannah's smile faded slightly. "I envy it, you know." He paused, finally glancing up. "What?" "This," she said, motioning around the garage. "You fix what's broken. You see the problem, you get your hands dirty, and then it works again. There's something honest about it." Michael tightened a bolt, then leaned back, wiping his hands on a rag. "You saying billionaires don't fix things?" "I'm saying billionaires hide things, spin them, paint over the cracks until the foundation caves in." The silence hung for a moment, not heavy, but full. She looked down at her hands, fingers playing with the edge of her sleeve. "It's exhausting, pretending to be fine all the time." Michael rested against the edge of the car. "You don't have to pretend here." She met his eyes, and something flickered there. Tiredness, yes, but also a kind of fragile honesty. "What about you?" she asked. "Always calm, always joking, ever pretend?" Michael looked toward the photo of him and Emily. "Every day," he said quietly. "You don't get the luxury of falling apart when a 7-year-old's watching." Savannah nodded slowly. "Yeah," she murmured. "I know that feeling." And for a moment, surrounded by engine grease and dust and the faint hum of the radio, two people from entirely different worlds sat in the same silence, and it felt like peace. The drawing was folded twice, slightly crinkled at the edges, with a faint smudge of grape jelly near the bottom corner. It had been tucked carefully into Emily's backpack, hidden between a library book and a ziplock of broken crayons. Michael only found it when he was packing her lunch that morning, and he'd smiled the second he saw it. Crayon lines danced across the page in bright, cheerful colors: blue sky, green grass, a red and white blanket stretched beneath a crooked tree. In the center of it all stood 3 stick figures. One was unmistakably Emily. Big ponytails, pink dress, wide smile. Beside her was a taller figure with short brown hair and a blue shirt. Michael, of course. And next to them, wearing a long yellow dress with a sparkling silver crown drawn in with glitter glue, stood the picnic princess. That's what Emily had written beneath it in her best second-grade handwriting. The picnic princess. Michael showed it to her when she came into the kitchen, barefoot and yawning. "You made this?" Emily nodded, already reaching for the cereal box. "Yeah, it's for her." "For Savannah?" "Mm-hmm." She poured a generous heap of cereal. "She said she didn't get to color much as a kid, and I figured maybe she'd like a picture, so she won't forget." Michael looked down at the paper again. The crown was a little off-center. The arms were stick-straight. But somehow, it was perfect. Later that afternoon, when Savannah stopped by to pick up her fixed convertible, he handed it to her in an envelope, without a word. She opened it right there by the counter, and something in her expression shifted. The kind of shift that wasn't meant for cameras or press releases. A breath caught. A blink that lasted a little longer than normal. "She made this for me?" she asked quietly. Michael nodded. "Said it was so you wouldn't forget the picnic." Savannah traced a finger over the drawing, landing gently on the glittery crown. "I won't," she said, folding it carefully, not too tight, and sliding it into the inside pocket of her leather bag. She zipped it shut, pressed the flap down, and patted it once. "Some things," she said softly, "you carry close." The convertible purred like a dream as Savannah eased it into the shop lot, the engine's once stubborn growl now a smooth, elegant hum. Michael wiped his hands on a rag and stepped out from beneath the hood of an old Ford, raising an eyebrow as she parked with practiced grace. She stepped out, no sunglasses this time, just clear eyes and a subtle smile that didn't feel like it belonged to the woman plastered across magazine covers. He expected her to thank him again for the repair, maybe offer a ride around the block to show off the smooth shift between gears. What he didn't expect was the manila folder she pulled from her bag. "I have something for you," she said, holding it out. Michael hesitated before taking it. It felt heavier than paper should. "Open it," she added. Inside, crisp documents. Letterhead with a logo he recognized: Hale Motor Heritage Division. A formal contract. Terms, compensation, responsibilities. A salary that made his stomach flip. "What is this?" he asked, flipping pages slowly. "I want you to work for me," Savannah said plainly. "Full-time. Restoring, maintaining, and managing my vintage collection. You'd have your own garage on the estate, access to anything you need, resources, staff, everything." Michael blinked. "You're serious? I don't make offers I don't intend to follow through on." He stared down at the folder. The numbers alone were staggering. Steady income, benefits, a future that didn't depend on whether Jenkins' truck stalled again or whether the rent could be paid on time. But it also meant leaving, shutting down the shop, the place he'd built from rust and hope, the one with the creaky office chair and the wall of photos. It meant pulling Emily out of the neighborhood she'd grown up in, trading quiet struggle for luxury and uncertainty. Savannah saw the hesitation in his eyes. "I'm not trying to take anything from you," she said, "but I see talent when it's right in front of me, and I'd rather give you a better way to use it than watch you burn out fixing busted mufflers for people who don't pay on time." Michael looked up at her, heart thudding. It was everything he thought he'd wanted, but was it everything he needed? Word got around fast in Maplewood, faster than Michael expected, faster than he liked. By Monday morning the town might as well have held a press conference. Some people found out through whispers at the diner, others from the barber shop, where Savannah's cherry-red convertible had become the talk of the hour. A few had seen the news online, those same blurry picnic photos now paired with headlines like "Local Mechanic Offered Life, Changing Deal by Billionaire Heiress," and just like that, everyone had an opinion. At the garage, Jared stopped by with a coffee and a raised brow. "So it's true," he asked. "You're leaving this place behind for some castle on a hill?" Michael leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "Didn't say I was leaving anything, just weighing my options." "Man, come on," Jared said, shaking his head with a grin. "You're the only guy I know who gets handed the golden ticket and hesitates." But not everyone saw it as a golden ticket. At the grocery store, Mrs. Fallon, the elderly woman who came in every 3 months with her beat-up Buick, clucked her tongue as she handed over a coupon. "That woman doesn't live in our world, Michael. People like that always take more than they give." At school pickup, one of the other parents leaned over with a polite smile too tight to be sincere. "So, I guess we'll be seeing less of you? Or none at all once you've moved on up?" Michael just nodded, the weight in his chest building with every interaction. Even the regulars at Duffy's bar weighed in. Some called him crazy for waiting. Others called him reckless for even considering it. "You think she'll stick around?" someone muttered under their breath. "Or is this just her latest charity project?" By the time Michael sat down at home that night, Emily curled up beside him, drawing another picture, this time of a house with a big garage and a tire swing out front, was drowning in noise. He looked at her calm, her certainty, her innocence. Everyone else saw a headline, a paycheck, a risk. But Emily just saw her dad, and he realized, whatever choice he made, it had to be for them, not the whispers. The envelope was thick, the kind of paper that felt more like Faber-Sivary, with gold trim, and a wax seal that seemed almost absurdly formal. Michael found it stuck between the shop's bills, slipped through the mail slot sometime during the afternoon. No return address, just his name in graceful handwriting across the front. He opened it with grease-streaked fingers, careful not to smudge the ink. Inside was an invitation, elegant script. Savannah Hale requests the pleasure of your company at the Hale Foundation Winter Gala, black tie. Friday evening, 7 p.m. The Orpheum Hotel, Grand Ballroom. And beneath it, a handwritten note. I'd love for you to bring Emily. He stared at the card like it might suddenly explain itself. It didn't. Later that night, he placed it on the kitchen table while Emily munched on her mac and cheese, swinging her feet beneath the chair. "What's that?" she asked, eyeing the fancy paper. Michael exhaled. "We've been invited to a fancy party." Emily's eyes widened. "Like with dresses and chandeliers and dancing?" "Something like that," she gasped, nearly dropping her spoon. "Are we going?" He hesitated. "I don't know, Em. It's not really our kind of thing." "But she asked us. Both of us." That part stuck with him. Savannah could have invited just him, but she hadn't. She'd asked for Emily, too. As if she understood that they were a package deal. No version of Michael came without his daughter. Emily leaned forward, eyes shining. "Can I wear sparkles?" Michael laughed, despite himself. "You can wear all the sparkles." She squealed and jumped down from the chair, racing to her room to dig through her makeshift dress-up box. But as she disappeared down the hall, Michael picked up the invitation again, running his thumb over the raised letters. Black tie. He didn't even own a proper tie, let alone one that could blend in with tuxedos and champagne towers. The excitement in Emily's voice still echoed through the apartment. And Michael? He felt something between pride and panic. Because he knew how to fix engines. But he didn't know how to walk into a room where people already believed he didn't belong. The Orpheum Hotel glowed like something out of a fairy. Tale every window lit, every marble column wrapped in winter white garlands and tiny golden lights. The valet raised an eyebrow when Michael pulled up in his weathered sedan, but said nothing as he took the keys with a polite nod. Michael stepped out in a borrowed suit navy, a little tight in the shoulders, sleeves a touch too short but clean pressed, and topped off with a dark tie he'd spent 20 frustrating minutes trying to knot. Beside him, Emily practically shimmered in a hand-me-down dress covered in sequins, her curls pinned back with glittery barrettes. She clutched his hand with a kind of awestruck wonder that made the moment feel worth every bit of discomfort. Inside, the ballroom was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers spilled light like champagne. Music from a live quartet danced over the sound of clinking glasses and the low hum of conversation. The people glittered just as much as the Decker-tailored tuxedos, silk gowns, heels that clicked like punctuation marks on marble floors. Michael swallowed hard, shoulders tightening as they stepped through the grand archway. He didn't belong here, that much was obvious. He could already feel the glances, the quiet sizing up, the too polished smiles. "Dad," Emily whispered, tugging his hand. "It's like a princess castle." He knelt beside her, adjusting her sparkly headband. "That's because you are a princess tonight, kiddo." Her face lit up. "Now that," a familiar voice said, warm and amused, "is exactly how to arrive." Michael turned and there she was, Savannah. Elegant in an off-the-shoulder black gown, her hair swept into soft waves, diamond studs catching the light. But her smile? That was what disarmed him. Not rehearsed. Not formal. Just real. "You clean up well," she said, eyes sweeping over him with a softness that made his pulse stutter. "You look," he trailed off, then gave a quiet, honest, "Wow." She held out her hand. "Dance with me?" He hesitated, glancing at the swirling crowd. "I don't know the steps," he admitted. "I'll teach you," she said, her voice low, eyes steady. And before he could talk himself out of it, Michael took her hand. It was warm, certain, unshaking, and as she pulled him gently onto the dance floor, everything else, the whispers, the stares, the polished perfection began to fade into the background. The article hit the internet just before sunrise, buried halfway down the entertainment site's homepage, beneath celebrity breakups and red carpet fashion critiques. But by mid-morning it had made its rounds. Faster than wildfire. Faster than anyone could control. Savannah Hale's mystery man, widower, mechanic, and liability? Michael first saw it when Jared texted him the link with nothing but a grim-faced emoji. He clicked it reluctantly, his stomach already tightening. The headline was followed by a grainy shot from the gala Michael in his too-tight suit, Savannah's hand on his arm, both of them mid-laugh. Below that, the tone shifted, colder, crueler. The piece laid everything bare. His wife's death in a car accident 7 years ago. The mountain of medical bills that followed. The eviction notice he once fought off by working double shifts and pawning his wedding ring. His small shops near closure during the worst of the pandemic. Even Emily's early days in a community daycare program had been dragged into the light, each fact twisted just enough to sting. The writer painted a picture not of resilience, but of a man clinging to the coattails of someone powerful. From auto shop to ballroom, has Hale's taste in charity extended to her personal life? The closing line asked. By the time Michael reached the end, his ears were ringing. He didn't care that they called him poor. He'd lived it, survived it, but dragging Emily into it? Digging through the most painful chapter of his life for clicks and curiosity? That was different. The garage phone rang off the hook all morning. Reporters, bloggers. A news crew even showed up outside, snapping photos of the peeling paint on his garage sign like it told them something about his soul. Michael shut the door, locked it. Closed the shop early without a word. When he picked up Emily from school, she asked why her friend's mom said their picture was on the internet. He smiled the way only a dad could, forced, practiced. Hollowan told her he'd explain later. But inside, a storm was already brewing. Because it wasn't just about embarrassment. It was about what happened when your real life messy, flawed, honest was shoved under a spotlight that never asked your permission. Savannah sat in her office, high above the city, where the skyline stretched like a painting, and the world below felt smaller than it was. The windows were tinted, the lights dimmed, but the glare from her phone screen felt blinding. Her name was trending. Again. So was Michael's. And Emily's. She hadn't planned for this. The gala had been a risk, sure, but she'd thought it through, or she'd convinced herself she had. A quiet invitation. A soft entry into her world, one evening of simple warmth in a place full of cold glass and sharper smiles. But the internet didn't care about warmth. It cared about weakness. About headlines. And now, Michael and his daughter were being dissected in places they'd never asked to be seen. She closed her eyes and leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled against her lips. There had been a meeting that morning. Her PR team suits and screens and carefully worded advice. One had said gently, "It's not just about your image, it's about the foundation, the board, the investors." Another said, not so gently, "He's not safe. You have to distance yourself." But it wasn't just about her. It was about Emily, a little girl who still believed in glitter and juice boxes and princess picnics. A little girl now being whispered about in circles she should never have to imagine. Savannah opened the drawer of her desk and pulled out the drawing, Emily's masterpiece. The picnic princess, crown and all, stick arms stretched toward a crooked, smiling sun. She ran her thumb over the glitter-glued crown and felt something like shame. She hadn't reached out since the article. She hadn't returned Michael's call. Not because she was angry, but because she was scared, not of him, of what her life might do to his. Because for all her power, she couldn't protect them from the machine she lived inside. And the truth she kept circling, but hadn't yet said aloud, echoed now like thunder. Maybe the best thing she could do for them was walk away. And so, for the first time since that morning in the park, Savannah stayed silent. The wind had picked up that evening, scattering leaves across the sidewalk and rattling the rusted sign outside Michael's garage. He sat on the front steps of their apartment, a mug of lukewarm coffee in his hands, staring out at nothing. Emily was inside, humming to herself as she colored, oblivious to the noise swirling just beyond their walls. It had been 3 days since the article. 3 days of flashing cameras parked across the street. Of phone calls he didn't answer. Of people pretending to be curious when what they really wanted was a story. And 3 days of silence from Savannah. He hadn't blamed her, not really. Not when the entire world was watching, waiting for her to make a move. He imagined the pressure, the headlines, the lawyers in glass offices telling her what was best for her image. And maybe they were right. Maybe keeping her distance was the safest thing. But that didn't make it hurt less. He thought about calling her again. He thought about driving to her office, demanding to know why everything had changed so fast. But every time he looked at Emily, soft-eyed, wide-smiling Emily, remembered what this had always been about. Keeping her safe. Keeping her whole. That meant protecting her from the noise. From the cliques. From people who twisted kindness into spectacle and turned simple joy into something scandalous. That night, he sat her down at the kitchen table. "Hey, Em," he said gently. "Remember that fancy garage job we talked about?" She looked up from her drawing. "The one with the cool cars?" He nodded. "I think I'm going to say no." Her eyes widened. "Why?" Michael hesitated, choosing his words with care. "Because sometimes big things come with big problems. And right now, I think what we need is small, safe, us." Emily blinked, then slowly nodded. "Okay," she said, "as long as we still do picnics." He smiled. "Always." He tucked her in that night, brushing a curl from her forehead. And as she drifted off to sleep, Michael sat beside her in the quiet dark, feeling the weight of a decision that wasn't easy but was necessary. Sometimes, choosing peace meant walking away from something good before it could break you. The park looked smaller without them. Savannah stepped out of the town car and pulled her coat tighter around her, the early evening chill settling into her bones like regret. The sun hung low on the horizon, bleeding soft gold into the sky, but it didn't offer much warmth. The willow tree swayed gently in the breeze, its long branches dancing like they remembered laughter that wasn't there anymore. She walked slowly, her heels crunching softly over the gravel path. No guards. No assistant. No distractions. Just her and the hollow ache she hadn't managed to shake since the silence between her and Michael had grown too wide to cross. When she reached the patch of grass where the checkered blanket had once been, she stopped. The ground was bare now, scattered with brittle leaves and a few forgotten feathers from the ducks that still wandered the lake's edge. The reserve sign was gone. No security perimeter. No curious stares. Just the echo of a moment that had felt like something real. She sat on the cold wooden bench, one leg crossed over the other, her hands resting on her lap. For a while, she just stared at the water, letting the quiet settle in her chest. She could still hear Emily's laughter in her memory, bright and unfiltered. She could see Michael leaning back on his elbows, smiling with the kind of ease she'd never seen at any gala, in any boardroom, and now it was gone. Not because she didn't want it, but because she hadn't known how to hold it without breaking it. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper she hadn't stopped carrying. Emily's drawing, The Picnic Princess. She smoothed it out gently on her lap, brushing her thumb over the glitter glue crown. "I should have fought harder," she whispered. A duck quacked in the distance, a soft sound that was met with silence. Savannah sat there until the sun slipped below the treetops, painting the lake in fading light. When she finally stood, the spot remained empty, untouched. But in her pocket, she carried the only proof it had ever been real. The letter was written in purple ink on lined notebook paper, the kind with wide margins and little flowers drawn in the corners. Emily had taken her time with it, tongue poking out as she carefully looped her letters, asking Michael to help her spell a few big words. She didn't tell him everything she was writing, just that it was important. He watched her from the kitchen, a gentle ache in his chest, as she folded the paper and sealed it in an envelope she had decorated with glitter stickers and a tiny, crooked heart. "Do you think she'll get it?" Emily asked, holding it up like it was something sacred. Michael nodded. "Yeah, Bug. I think she really needs it." They walked to the postbox together, and Emily slid the letter in with both hands, standing on tiptoe to be sure it dropped all the way through. She looked up at him after, satisfied, like she'd just finished something only she could do. "I hope it makes her feel better," she said softly, miles away, in the glass and steel quiet of her penthouse. Savannah opened the mailbox in her private office without much thought. It was mostly formal invitations, sealed contracts, things that passed through her life without leaving a mark. But one envelope stood out. Purple ink, glitter stickers. A name written in slightly wobbly handwriting. Miss Savannah Hale. Her breath caught. She opened it carefully, unfolding the lined page as if it might tear from too much pressure. And then she read, "Dear Savannah, I know sometimes people go away, like my mom did, and sometimes your heart gets real quiet, but that doesn't mean they're gone forever. Because if you miss someone, and you remember them really big in your heart, it's kind of like they're still there. You made me laugh, and you liked my sandwich, and you didn't even care that I got jelly on your shoes. That's why you're special. It's okay to miss people. My mom is still in my heart. You can be too. Love." Emily Turner Savannah read it twice, then pressed the paper to her chest, eyes stinging. Sometimes children know more about healing than adults ever will. It started with a knock. Michael looked up from beneath the hood of a battered pickup truck, wiping sweat and dust from his brow. He wasn't expecting anyone. Business had been slow, and the last thing he needed was another reporter or curious passerby looking for a soundbite. He braced himself for more questions he didn't want to answer. But when he opened the garage door, what he saw wasn't a stranger. It was a truck. A brand new flatbed pulling into the lot, followed by a team in matching uniforms marked Hale Motors Restoration Division. They moved with quiet precision, no fanfare, no flashy logos. Just tools in hand, and blueprints rolled under their arms. Michael stepped out, confusion hardening into cautious disbelief. The woman in the passenger seat of the lead truck stepped down first. Savannah. She wore jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled back. No makeup, no press behind her, just that same calm, sure look he remembered from the park. The one that didn't demand space. The one that offered it. "Hope you don't mind," she said, walking toward him, a folder tucked beneath her arm. "I decided it was my turn to fix something." Michael crossed his arms, blinking at the team unloading new signage, tools, and fresh siding materials. "Savannah, what are you doing?" She stopped in front of him, lifted the folder, and opened it. Inside were signed permits, contractor forms, and the very TOPA deed. Transferred. Paid in full. The building, the land. No strings. "You fixed my car," she said. "You fixed my afternoon, my head. That day at the park, I didn't know how badly I needed someone to just be human with me. And Emily's letter," her voice caught. "That fixed more than I can explain." Michael looked down at the paperwork, then up at the shop, his shop, the place that had been slowly falling apart, patched up with whatever he could scrounge. Now gleaming crews were prepping new paint, new signage, everything he'd always dreamed of but couldn't reach. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. Savannah smiled. "Maybe not, but you've spent your whole life fixing things for everyone else." She held out the deed. "Let someone fix something for you." The park was quiet again. Late afternoon, sun spilled across the grass. The light, softer than it had been that first day, filtered through the willow's drooping branches. A breeze stirred the lake's surface, making it shimmer like glass. It was the same spot down to the bare patch of earth where their old checkered blanket had once rested. But this time, there were no cameras. No whispers. No reserved signs. Just Michael, sitting on the bench with a paper bag between his hands and a nervous stillness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. He heard her before he saw her soft footsteps on the gravel. Unhurried. When he turned, there she was. Savannah wore a simple dress. No heels, no jewelry. Her hair loose and swept back by the breeze. She looked nothing like the woman from the headlines, and everything like the one who'd once shared a sandwich with a wide-eyed little girl. "You came," he said. "I wasn't sure I would," she admitted. "But Emily's letter? It reminded me what matters." She sat beside him on the bench, close but not too close. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore, just honest, "You didn't have to fix the shop," he said. "I know," she replied. "But I wanted to, not for headlines, not to feel good, just because you deserved it." Michael nodded slowly. "When it all blew up, I thought walking away was the right thing, protecting Emily, protecting myself." "I thought the same," Savannah said quietly. "I told myself I was keeping you safe, but really, I was just scared." He looked over at her, their eyes meeting without hesitation now. "Of what?" "Of being real," she said. "Of not being in control for once. Of loving something I couldn't shield from the world." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Michael reached into the bag and pulled out 2 sandwich espionette butter and jelly, wrapped in wax paper. He held one out. "No security, no gala, just us." Savannah took it, smiling. "Perfect." They sat there beneath the willow tree, eating in quiet companionship, watching ducks glide across the lake. And when her fingers brushed his tentative, testing, true he didn't pull away. This time, no one ran. The sky was streaked with dusk when they moved from the bench to the grass, the last bit of light clinging to the edge of the lake. Their empty sandwich wrappers lay crumpled between them, a quiet testament to how far they'd come from awkward hellos and hesitant glances. Michael leaned back on his hands, legs stretched out, watching as Savannah tucked her hair behind one ear. She looked different here, lighter, somehow. Not stripped down, but seen. "You ever wonder," she said softly, "what you'd be like if your life had started somewhere else? Somewhere bigger?" Michael glanced over. "Can't say I've had the luxury." Savannah gave a small laugh. "I used to wonder all the time. What if I'd been born in a town like this? What if I had a mom who packed PB&J instead of a housekeeper who left meals in warming trays? What if someone tucked me in instead of texting a nanny to make sure I got to bed on time?" Her voice was steady, but there was an old crack beneath the surface, thin, almost invisible, but deep. "I grew up in a mansion with 20 rooms, and none of them ever felt like home," she said. "My father was always closing deals, always traveling. My mother was a name in tabloids. I had everything I was told I should want. But I don't think anyone ever asked me what I needed." Michael listened, quiet. No interruptions. No pity. "When Emily handed me that sandwich," Savannah continued, her voice thickening just slightly, "it was the first time in years someone gave me something without expecting anything back. Just kindness. For no reason." She picked a blade of grass, twisting it between her fingers. "You two made me feel like I could breathe again? Like maybe I didn't have to be perfect to be wanted." Michael didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, this woman who'd been so far out of reach, and yet, here she was. Open, human, real. "You know what Emily said to me after that first day?" he finally said. "She called you the picnic princess. Thought you came from a fairy tale." Savannah smiled, soft and a little sad. "I didn't." Michael reached for her hand. "Maybe not, but she's right about one thing." She looked at him, eyes questioning. "You do belong at our table." Spring settled into Maplewood like a sigh of relief-warm sun on old rooftops, fresh blooms pushing through cracked sidewalks, and a breeze that carried the scent of cut grass and something new. Life didn't look different at a glance. The diner still served the same greasy breakfasts. Old Man Jenkins still fell asleep on the bench outside the hardware store, and Michael's garage still smelled like oil and coffee. But beneath the familiar rhythm, quiet changes had begun to take root. It started with the shop. What had once been a tired, leaning building now stood tall with fresh siding and a bright new sign, Turner Co. Auto honest work, local heart. The company part wasn't for a partner. It was for Emily. Michael said she earned it. Then came the community center repairs. New windows, better plumbing, a fresh coat of paint, no press releases, no grand ribbon cuttings. Just invoices paid in full, contractors hired from the next town over, and supplies delivered overnight. All discreetly handled through a new foundation Savannah had established under a different name. Maple Root Fund. No headlines. Just help. When the library received a donation large enough to finally upgrade their outdated computers and add a new children's reading nook, no one could trace it. But Michael knew. And so did the librarian, who'd found a note inside the envelope that simply read, "For the storytellers of tomorrow." Savannah visited often, but never as a spectacle. No limos, no camera crews. She'd walk into the garage in jeans and a hoodie, coffee in one hand, a smile in the other. Sometimes she brought Emily a book or a puzzle. Sometimes she just came to sit on the office couch and listen to the radio while Michael worked. She never tried to change Maplewood, never talked about redeveloping or rebranding. She didn't want to build it into something shinier. She just wanted to hold it up, let it breathe. Because for once, the girl who had grown up with everything had found something she'd never had: roots. A real place, with real people. And it all started with a sandwich. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a warm amber glow across Maplewood Park as neighbors gathered near the willow tree. Children chased one another through the grass. Parents sipped coffee from paper cups, and the lake shimmered quietly nearby. It wasn't a formal ceremony, no microphones, no velvet ropes, just a small circle of people who knew each other well enough to share silence without awkwardness. Michael stood beside Emily, one hand on her shoulder, the other holding a tissue she didn't need yet, but probably would. She wore her favorite yellow dress, the one with the sewn-on daisies and white sandals that scuffed when she walked too fast. Savannah was there too, a few steps behind, watching without fanfare, a soft smile playing on her lips. At the edge of the grass, a new bench had been placed beneath the willow's sweeping branches. Sturdy, clean, made of smooth oak and iron. But what made it special wasn't the bench itself. It was the small brass plaque fastened to the backrest. Michael crouched beside Emily and brushed his hand over the plaque, revealing the inscription, "Moments that Matter, in memory of quiet kindness and glitter crowns." Inspired by the artwork of Emily Turner. An engraved line drawing of 3 stick figures, a picnic blanket, and a tiny crayon crown. All recreated from her original sketch. Emily's eyes widened. "That's my drawing," she whispered. Michael nodded, voice catching. "Yeah, bug, it is." There was a pause, as if the air itself was honoring the moment. Savannah stepped forward then, kneeling beside Emily. "Your drawing reminded me that not everything important needs to be loud to be remembered." Emily looked up at her. "Is this so people don't forget?" Savannah smiled. "No, sweetheart, it's so people remember what matters." They sat together on the new bench, Emily in the middle, swinging her legs, Michael on one side, Savannah on the other. And as the sky turned shades of rose and gold, the three of them looked out over the lake, the breeze soft in the trees, the world gentle for just a little while. It wasn't about the bench, it was about the moment, and the memory they'd built, now carved in wood and brass for anyone willing to sit still long enough to feel it. The grass was just as soft as it had been a year ago, maybe even softer, warmed by the early summer sun, and brushed clean by a gentle morning breeze. Birds chirped from the branches above, and the lake glittered under a sky so blue it looked painted. The willow tree swayed lazily, and the familiar bench beneath it stood proud and still, its brass plaque catching the sunlight like a quiet smile. This time, there were no accidental seatings, no security detail, no curiosity from passers-by. Just 3 people who'd come back to where it all started. Michael laid out the checkered blanket on the same patch of grass while Emily bounced in place, holding the picnic basket like it was made of treasure. She'd insisted on packing it herself: peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, apple slices, a thermos of lemonade, and of course, a bag of animal crackers. Savannah walked across the grass with a woven tote and a sun hat tilted slightly to the side. She wore sandals, denim, and a look of calm that had taken a long, winding year to grow into. There were still moments when the weight of her world found Herbert not here. Not today. "Okay," Emily announced as she plopped down in the middle of the blanket. "I'm the official picnic captain. Rules are, no phones, no sad stuff, and you have to eat at least 1 animal cracker, even if it's a weird flavor." Michael grinned and held up a hand in mock solemnity. "I accept your terms." Savannah gave a small bow. "As do I, Captain Emily." They ate slowly, with no rush, no pressure. Just stories and soft laughter and moments that filled in all the empty spaces left behind by a life that used to be harder. At one point, Emily climbed onto the bench to trace the plaque with her fingers. A family walking by paused, read it, and smiled. "That's my drawing," she told them proudly. And no one doubted her for a second. As the sun began to dip, painting the lake in gold, Michael leaned back on the blanket, Savannah beside him, their fingers laced together. Not much had changed in Maplewood. But for the three of them, everything had. This time, the picnic wasn't a surprise. It was a tradition. The park was quieter now. The sun had slipped behind the trees, leaving behind a warm afterglow that bathed everything in soft gold. Ducks floated lazily across the lake, and the breeze carried the smell of grass and memory. Emily had fallen asleep on the blanket, her head resting on a folded sweater, an open picture book still balanced on her chest. Michael sat on the bench beneath the willow tree, elbows on his knees, eyes tracing the gentle ripples on the water. Beside him, Savannah leaned into his shoulder, her hand resting over his. Neither of them spoke for a while. They didn't need to. He looked out at the spot where the blanket lay, where their lives had first tangled by accident and stubbornness and peanut butter. It was funny, in a way. All the plans he used to make, all the ways he'd tried to keep life stitched together with tools and late nights and grit, none of them had led here. But a moment of kindness, a shared sandwich, a little girl's smile, that had. He thought of the man he was, that day-tired, broke, overwhelmed. A man trying to be everything to one small girl without letting the cracks show. And he thought of Savannah, arriving like a storm he hadn't seen coming. Polished, powerful, completely out of reach. Until she wasn't. "This spot changed everything," he murmured. Savannah looked up at him. "It did." "I thought I'd lost the good part of life," he said quietly. "The part with joy, with hope. I didn't know there was still more to find." She squeezed his hand. "Sometimes we don't know what we need until it sits down beside us on a picnic blanket." He smiled, soft and full. "You know, I used to think stories like this only happened in movies. Rich girl meets small-town guy. Two different worlds. Not so different," she whispered. "Not anymore." He looked down at Emily, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, and for the first time in years he felt full. Not stretched thin, not bracing for the next blow. Just full. The spot had been reserved, once, not for them, but fate had other plans. And somehow, against all odds, it had become theirs.